Hello, my noble band of outlaws. Outlaw Samurai coming at you live with a video. Well, there's a question that must be asked. What happens when you're a filthy gaijin dog and like samurai sword, but you're also uncultured heathen that likes double-edged longsword? Well, you become an uncouth bastard child, and this shit happens! Behold, the review of the Cold Steel Kriegsmesser. Now with better camera work. So when I did the unboxing video of this sword, you saw my camera work was incredibly shaky and all over the place. That was because I was kind of rushing and maneuvering around everybody at the time. But now I can give a full review of the Cold Steel Kriegsmesser. Now, a couple of updates. One, I have made a scabbard for this sword. Not the best scabbard in the world, but it serves its purpose. I'll show you that in a moment. First, we'll go over the technical specifications, okay? As I always do with these in-depth reviews, the description. The Kriegsmesser, or war knife, is Cold Steel's new variation on the popular Grossmesser, which is a different model of sword, but they're both messers, which in German just means knife, by the way. It features a traditional nagel, or nail, on the crossguard, which I'll show you again once I go over it. To protect the outside of the hand instead of the side ring on the Grossmesser. So the Grossmesser actually has a more longsword-like side ring, which is just a ring of steel attached to the right hand side of the crossguard. The blade is made from high carbon steel, which is with a hard spring timber and comes fully sharpened. The upswept point is ideal for cutting and slashing, and due to its distal taper and 3/4 length fuller, it has a it is fast and nimble in the hand. To protect the hand and forearms, our Kriegsmesser features a steel guard with long crewlins. The handle is also traditional and consists of a full tang complete with a steel pommel and rosewood grip scales. Retained by our 4 copper pins, the handle is long enough for 1 or 2 hand use, with a surprisingly secure grip because of the slightly curved I think they put a typo on here. It's supposed to say slightly curved. It's supposed to say curved as Grammarly. So slightly curved because of the slight curve through the handle scales. Oh, I think they're supposed to say groove. Okay. Because of the slight groove through the handle scales and the flesh of the fingers can bite into. So, as I was butchering the hell out of that, they mean this little groove in the middle of the grip. The blade is tempered 1060 high carbon steel. The hilt components are steel, and the full tang grip has a thick tang of steel, which is matched with 2 grip scales of polished wood, which are copper riveted to the thick tang. In addition to this already durable construction, the blade tang is peened over the pommel for an altogether robust construction. And I truly believe that, because you get that good ringing sound that good swords make. That sound that when you tap the side of the blade, you hear that ding, 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 which means the blade is a good quality. I'm going to have to write a review for Cult of Athena later. Specifications. Overall length is 44 1/2 inches. Note, I don't really measure my sword for 2 reasons. One, I don't have a weight scale, so I can't tell you exactly how heavy my particular model is. 2, there's always going to be variation between what the factory specifications are and what you get, so I don't really go into full nitpickiness about that. Blade length is 33 5/8 inch. Weight is 3 pounds 6 ounces. Edge sharp. Width is 43.5 millimeters, which I'm guessing to be about 1/4 of an inch thick. In filthy American, all the Europeans like filthy American measurements. That's right, we measure shit in American ways. Because I'm American. Deal with it. Oh, width is not thickness. Width is the blade the blade is 43.5 millimeters wide. The thickness is 6.8 millimeters to 2.2 millimeters at the tip. Point of balance is 4 inches from the guard. Grip length 9-inch wooden part of grip. So the pommel adds about another inch, maybe 1.25 inches. Blade is 1060 high carbon steel. No classification. Culture, German. Manufacturer, cold steel. Country of origin, India. Which, a lot of people, when they get swords that are supposed to be traditionally made, like military sabers and such from the 18th century and 17th century, what people don't really realize is a lot of military swords, the manufacturing is actually outsourced to other countries. So, if I'm not mistaken, in 1776, a lot of the American Revolutionary sabers, like windlass cells, a lot of those weren't actually made in America. They were actually made overseas and shipped over to America. Or they were originally British officer sabers that American colonial soldiers picked up off the battlefield and started using. So, to say that a sword is not historically made if it's made in another country is not always exactly correct. Now, the one exception is with katana, Nihonto. A katana, a true katana, according to a lot of traditionalists, is only if you go all the way traditional, made in Japan. But to me, a Nihonto is any sword that's actually made in Japan. So it can be made out of 5160, 1095, or Tamahagane, but as long as it's actually made in Japan and marked by a Japanese smith, that's a Nihonto to me. I'm a little more flexible with my viewpoints. Katanas that are made over in like China and sometimes even America, those are what I would like to think of as like modern katana, not traditional katana. I think I made a whole video of my viewpoints on that. But in any case, those are the specifications, a little bit of a ramble. Oh wait, when you go to Cult of Athena and click videos, do not be fooled by the Kriegsmesser from Scalagram. That is the Albion Kriegsmesser that is no longer available. Which the Albion Kriegsmesser and this Kriegsmesser are pretty much identical in their appearance. But I've looked up the specifications for the Albion Kriegsmesser, and this one is actually just a little bit lighter and a little bit thinner, by only a few ounces and millimeters. So yeah. Then you have a couple of reviews. This sword will go for $379.99 on Cult of Athena's website. If you use the Sizzle payment feature, that's broken up into $106, $106, $106, and $107 payments. I haven't made my second payment on this sword yet. And usually when I do this, I usually wait to do any actual testing till after I've paid it off, but after doing a lot of cold steel reviews, I think the majority of my big brand in my collection of Cold Steel at this point, because to me, Cold Steel swords are great. They feel nice in my hand. But I digress. On to the Kriegsmesser. Now that we've gotten the specifications out of the way, I'll give you a actual decent look at the Kriegsmesser. Now, I have gone out already and I did a couple of little test swings on branches and such, little nitpicks. And from what I can tell, this sword is not something you generally want to give to a beginner, in my opinion, if you're going to get into any kind of cutting. I mean, yeah, it feels great, and it doesn't have necessarily a whole lot of flex to it. It does flex good, but with just how thin this blade gets near the tip, it does have a very obvious percussion node right about here, where the fuller actually ends. And when I say I wouldn't exactly give this sword to a beginner, what I mean is that from those little tiny little snipe cuts I did, I can tell that if your edge alignment is slightly off, with the blade being as flexible as it is at the tip, it actually deflected a little bit with me. Now that may be because I'm cutting with the very tip of this thing instead of, I was cutting with the very, very tip of this thing, like this much of the blade at the time, instead of down here at the percussion node. But that's just me. I feel like this is a blade you'd give like, I want to say an intermediate, not really experienced cutter, but intermediate, like it just offers a bit more of a challenge. But yeah, the blade itself is very nimble. Like they said on Cult of Athena, I can put the tip of this thing wherever I want to, very easily. And it's very easy to swing around one-handed. As you can see, I have great control over it. The only thing about the blade is I think it could be just a hair thicker at the top. Like in the weak of the blade, which up here is the weak and down here is the strong. And those are terminologies for, because when you're in a bind, your opponent, if he pushes up here, has more control over your sword than if he pushes down here. But in any case, I feel like it could be just a bit thicker near the end of the blade. Maybe cut the distal taper just a hair to 3 millimeters instead of 2. But that's pretty much the only critique I have on the blade. I have really no negative comments about this sword. As you can see, it's got a nice stabbing point. But yeah, next we'll move down to the crossguard. And this part right here is the noggle. When you hold the sword, it protects your knuckles. When you hold the sword right, it protects your knuckles and will catch, use this, and will catch an opponent's blade so you can push off and basically, when you've caught your opponent's blade, you can push, and if this had a false edge, bring down the false edge and cut their head or cut their neck or shoulder. But yeah, Now, I will say that I find the Quillons to be just a bit too long. I prefer if the Quillons only went about yay far from the crossguard. And I get it, this is historically German, but the thing about the Quillons is that a lot of the sword techniques I'm used to doing and using have smaller discards that don't dig into my arm whenever I move my hand in a certain way. So it's definitely a sword meant to be kept in a forward position so that the crossguard is always front and center, in my opinion. I like how the little accents here, just giving crossguards little chamfers like this add a lot of aesthetic value. If this was just like squared off, I'd still be fine with that, but I do like the little embellishment of that. Cold steel swords really aren't really swords meant for glit and glamour. To coin a Outlaw Samurai, for a quote of Outlaw Samurai, they're not Barbie swords, they're G.I. Joe swords. And what I mean by Barbie swords are, no, they're not girly swords or anything like that. Barbie is in like all the accessories, the accoutrement, the over-the-top packaging. You know, like with Barbie dolls, you buy one Barbie doll and then you have that whole like Malibu playset and bullshit like that. With G.I. Joe, they basically just say, here's the action figure, here's a couple of toy guns to pose it with, you're good, start smashing them into each other. And that's what cold steel swords are. Or a better analogy, they ain't beauties. They ain't beauty. They're not. Better analogy. They ain't ceremonial. They're battlefield swords. And ceremonial, like with all the glitter, like I said with the Barbie reference, glitz, glamour, all that bullcrap. Whereas in battlefield swords, if you take a look through history and you look at the different weapons and such, there's a clear difference between swords that were meant for ceremonial use and swords that were meant for use on the battlefield. Because swords that were meant for use on the battlefield have pretty much no embellishment, no design. There's just basically like this. You have a pommel, you have a grip, you have a guard, you have a blade. Here you go. Start killing our enemies. Whereas swords with embellishments, they're like ceremonial use. But I digress. I rambled too much. So I left off on the crossguard. That's pretty much the only critique I have about a crossguard. It's thick, it's sturdy. It ain't going nowhere, it ain't bending anytime soon. The noggle is nice, very thick stock, very sturdy. And, fun fact, the noggle is actually peened on the other side of the crossguard. So this crossguard is actually peened in place. Just like everything else. Everything is peened and riveted onto the tang. So it makes an extremely durable construction. You'll snap this blade before you snap the junction at the tang. As you can see, the tang goes all the way up into the crossguard, which, unlike with classic European swords, you don't see the tang at all. And that's because this is not actually a sword. But I'll get into that in a second. The pommel is also peened. You can see where it's peened. it's a very well, in my opinion, it's a very well done peen. But I have you could say I have very low standards for aesthetics. I mean, as long as the sword functions the way I imagine it's supposed to function, and as long as it does sword things, I'm not really all that big on, like, aesthetics. I'm a very simple man. I like my sword sharp, strong, and won't break on me, and my blades straight. The rosewood is very lovely, in my opinion. And as it comes with 4 copper riveted peens. And the grip is very comfortable. When I unboxed this sword, I made a comment that it dug into my hand. Very blocky, very sharp edge. But now that I've gotten used to it and I've swung it around for the past couple of days, it actually doesn't feel bad anymore. Like, it's a little thin for my liking. Like, narrow, but I could always just give it like a paracord over. I could always gut some paracord and put that over this. So, not really a deal breaker. But yeah, very nice. This actually feels more like my training wooden swords now, because I like rectangular grips. I'm weird. I like rectangular and octagonal grips. I like the feel, I like the aesthetic. And it also has a very nice tachikaze. I don't know if you were able to hear that. And I know I'm using Japanese terminology here, like the Kisaki, the Suba, the Kashira. At one point, Japan and Germany were allies, people. Remember that. So I can use these terms interchangeably and still be culturally correct. Yes, I just realized. Yes, I know. I made a World War II reference. Sue me. But in any case, this actually comes predating World War II and even World War I. This was made back in the Renaissance. At least the blade design was. But, let's see here. This review is already becoming a 20-plus minute video. So I'll give a brief history of the Kriegsmesser in another video. But yeah, overall, very nice sword. I can easily recommend buying this. And from what I can find and what I can tell, Cold Steel is basically, and I don't mean this in any offense, the poor man's Albion. If Albion is all glitz and glamour and fancy, Albion is still very functional. Their swords work. They wouldn't be the #1 sword in cutting competitions year after year if their shit wasn't good. But Cold Steel, in my opinion, is the poor man's Albion. Because Albions cost, the least amount of money you'll pay for an Albion is $600. You can buy 2 of these from Cold Steel and dual wield them. Yes, I have an idea now. That's happening. But in any case, you can get 2 of these from Cold Steel for the price you pay for 1 Albion. And the Albion's Kriegsmesser is no longer available, but this is basically just a smaller version of the original Albion Kriegsmesser, literally almost copy and paste. There are some differences in the blade, but that's just my opinion. It's basically a copy and paste of the Albion Kriegsmesser, but smaller. But, as I said, this is the poor man's Albion, because you can buy more Cold Steel swords for the price of 1 Albion, and they still function the same. It doesn't matter the material you make a sword out of. A sword made from 1045 can compete on the same level as a sword made of 1095. It all depends on the swordsmith and how the blade is made. If you take both of these steels, forge them exactly the same, temper them exactly the same, quench them exactly the same, yes, the 1045 blade is going to dull quicker, but in essence, both of them are steel. In essence, both of them do the same purpose. They both cut, stab, and if need be, smash. So yeah. Cold Steel can be proud to call themselves the poor man's Albion. Because pretty much anyone can pick up a Cold Steel sword on budget. Now, not necessarily if you go to their website, because then their prices pretty much match Albion. But if you get them from distributors like Cult of Athena, TrueSwords.com, even Amazon, they sell them for a lot less than they do on the Cold Steel website. Which is weird. Because an $800 sword on the Cold Steel website you can get that some bitch for like $400, $300 on Cult of Athena. But I digress. So this has been the review of the Cold Steel Kriegsmesser. And like I said, I will be doing a history video on the Kriegsmesser. So until next time, my noble band of outlaws, Outlaw Samurai tells all y'all, be crazy rednecks, be safe in using your weapons. Cutting video for this sword will come soon, I promise. I'm out. Peace.